What's good, kings and queens? I hope everyone's having a good November. This week's video is on the long-awaited revision of Cherry Picking Gone Wrong. This series I originally introduced autumn of 2016. Before we jump into the video, let's discuss actions that don't fall in the lines of cherry picking, but often get mistaken for cherry picking. At the top of the list, fighting your mandatory opponents. A champion's duty is to fight one mandatory annually. If they are not trying to unify titles, they should be fighting their mandatory opponents. So instead of shaming responsible champions doing their job as champion, you should be taking that energy and going after fighters that avoid their duties and find everything to not fight their mandatory, all while pretending to have such interest in unifying.
Aren't you embarrassed by this? A great fighter having to fight
a mandatory that's by the rules. I have to fight because they would do like Roy Jones didn't want him to do before he fought John Ruiz.
Don't tell me about anybody else.
If I didn't fight and defend my mandatory with the WBC, they would have stripped me. And I don't care what you say or anybody else say. This is my life, it's my prerogative. You do your job, I do mine.
Active full-time boxers fight much more annually than an average fighter. They do this because either they do not have the financial luxury of having training camps, and this is a way of staying in shape, gaining experience, staying sharp while earning an extra dollar. Perfect example, former champion Sirsikitsor Rungvisai. Rungvisai became mandatory for the WBC super flyweight title, earning his rematch against Carlos Cuadras in 2014. Somehow Rungvisai did not get his fight for the title till 2017. Instead of just waiting around, gathering rust and not making money, because he doesn't have such luxuries like fighters out west, he fought regularly till ultimately the WBC threw that burden on Roman Gonzalez. Now you're probably asking, does a guy like Julio Cesar Chavez belong in this bracket? And he actually does not. He fought all his mandatory contenders annually and stayed busy throughout the year, fighting opponents that you can classify as a sparring partner, but getting paid to do so like a Buck Smith. This certainly kept Chavez in shape and sharp, as he had a small window of time to take a legitimate break where one could put on some weight and party. Which, if we go back to Chavez's crazy lifestyle during those periods where he wasn't fighting for a couple months, that certainly helped prolong his career, as it forces him to be in fighting shape for almost a whole year, compared to your traditional seasonal 2 fights a year boxer, who few do breaks in moderation and stay in shape during those breaks of no fights. There is absolutely no one available on that schedule to be matched up against you. The date is already made for the fight, but the laundry list of opponents may not be available. In an ideal case, you will have that champ fight someone who is ranked in the top 10 of Ring Magazine, or 15 by that belt organization. If there are neither, that's a cherry pick. Example, Ledwaba's mandatory had backed out. Despite Manny Pacquiao being ranked in the top 10, on paper he is not next in line. Unless you have vital context, all of those opponents ranked above Pacquiao were not in no shape or form available to fight Ledwaba at that already scheduled date, so the IBF had to recognize it and grant Manny as a new challenger for Ledwaba's title. Lastly, purposely stalling a fight to where that fighter has a lower chance of defeating you. The average person wouldn't be able to see. A perfect, well-documented example is Sugar Ray Leonard against Marvin Hagler. Most ignored it because Leonard's eye injury and his long layoff, but Leonard had been putting off this fight for years, as it was literally brought up as early as the Larry Bonds fight in 1981, 6 months before the Hearns fight, as an option of the Hearns fight if it didn't happen, but also a future fight for Leonard if he were to get past Hearns.
For Leonard, this is the first part of a 3-fight strategy. The next fight scheduled for June is supposed to be against Ayub Kalouli, the junior middleweight champion. And after that, later in the year, a big one against a dangerous opponent. Either Hearns, the WBA champion, Cuevas, the former WBA champion, or our color man tonight, Marvin Hagler.
Leonard invited Muhammad Ali, Howard Cosell, and 10,000 other friends and fans to a gala ceremony in Baltimore's Civic Center. For Hagler's camp, the personal request of their presence could only mean one thing.
Leonard would then troll fans, media, and Hagler himself that he was going to fight him, attracting a massive crowd to a venue just to announce that he was retiring, which absolutely devastated Hagler.
And we sat there with that anticipation as Leonard led us down the primrose path.
to Marvin Hagler, a fight with this great
man, this great champion, could be one of the greatest fights in the history of boxing. But unfortunately, it'll never happen.
Marvin never, ever forgave him for that. To this day, you say Ray Leonard and you duck if you're with Marvin Hagler.
It wasn't up till close to 4 years later, after his second retirement, he decided to fight Hagler, all because he saw a piece of him slow down in the Mugabe fight. It's something only Leonard saw and no one else, to where Leonard himself even acknowledged.
And when the ref said 10, Ray stood up, he looked at me and said, I can beat him, I'm gonna fight him.
People ask me, say, you coming back? I said, no, I'm not coming back. But if Marvin Hagler called me, I consider something like that.
Wait, wait about it.
I'm not saying, no, JB, listen, we're talking here. I'm not saying I'm coming back. I said, if he should call me, it's something I could really consider.
I was home watching TV. They said Sugar Ray Leonard will be fighting Marvin Hagler. I said, what?
But the fight was so big and ended up being so good that no one cared it was an actual cherry. With all that being said, let's start the video. So this was a fight after Guerrero's loss against Danny Garcia. His opponent will be David Emmanuel Peralta. Robert just came off fighting for a title. The matchmakers really went deep and far finding an opponent, because Peralta is virtually unknown. All his fights were in Argentina. He did fight for the IBF Latino title and lost fights prior, but he was unranked. Peralta is not even in the top 40 ranks by the WBC. Neither has any rank with the IBF. Guerrero was ranked number 13 by the WBC. Given the fact that this was a main event, this was certainly a fight to put Guerrero in a position for something bigger against a guy on paper who was supposed to have given him a highlight reel victory. Now, there are many cases over the decades, and if not a century of boxing, on and off record, where fighters would joke on other fighters' opponents saying they fought cab drivers, which somehow that's supposed to equate to an inferior fighter because they have to work a job to contribute to their other job. David Peralta is an actual cab driver in Argentina who boxes whenever he can. Peralta, in his biggest fight, would rise to the occasion and put that century-old stereotype to rest, giving Guerrero all he can handle, even dropping him in the 9th round, which wasn't counted as a knockdown. Peralta would win by a split decision. USA Today is real petty with this headline. They're right, but wrong, but right at the same time. Fara was making the defense of his international WBC title against unknown Joe Smith Jr. Not much information on Joe Smith besides the notes from local news that he was rising through the ranks. Based on the opponents he was fighting at the time, headlining small club events, he may have been in the top 50 ranks of the WBC, because unfortunately, due to the inconsistent available records of the WBC ranks month to month, year to year, I can't give a 100% accurate rank, especially in this case. Fara Smith was a setup fight for a rematch against Adonis Stevenson, who is actually yet to fight his mandatory or unified titles. This setup fight is in summer of 2016, and his last mandatory defense was in 2013. So this was a rematch that no one wanted to see. Stevenson had already convincingly beaten Fara, and everyone wanted a Kovalev, Hopkins, or fight his mandatory, the number 4 ranked Eleider Alvarez. So a ridiculous matchup no one wanted, that was almost mashed down through the boxing fans' throats, came to a miraculous end when Joe Smith pulled off the upset of the year, knocking Fara out in the first round of the fight in an impressive fashion. So if you're going to blatantly avoid your mandatory by paying him off to step aside, Joe Smith Jr. now actually ranked at number 2 in the ratings, right below the guy his folks been holding back. Nope, that matchup doesn't happen. Stevenson goes ahead and fight unknown Thomas Williams Jr. The light heavyweight division had a major hangover when exiting out of the early 2010s. A lot of potential for the new era was ruined thanks to greed and ego. Now luckily in the 2020s, that division has finally recovered. Victor Postal was the mandatory opponent for Garcia's title, and Danny found some way to not only avoid fighting Postal, but also having the WBC and WBA to sanction a 12-round championship bout against an unranked lightweight, the 19-3 Rod Salka. This was going forward as a championship bout. If it wasn't for Teddy Atlas's rant, calling them out and calling out Al Heyman, followed up with media backlash, this certainly would have been
unranked ranked by the WBC and WBA, and yet he's fighting for Danny Garcia's junior welterweight title. Now, Teddy, there are criteria and qualifications you have to meet to fight in a title fight. One of them is that you have to be either a top 10 rated contender, a former champion, or a current champion, among other things. He doesn't meet any of those criteria. So how is he getting this fight?
He's not rated. I wanted to show you that 15 guys in each one of those organizations are rated. He's not one of them. He's not even close.
For both titles in a 12-round bout. Due to all of that, this fight was made a 10-round non-title bout, but it looked like the title purses remained the same as Garcia pulled in $700K and Rod Salka $125K, which that itself is a meme because he made more money than the UFC champion Amanda Nunes when she fought Ronda Rousey. Rousey, who received a $3 million purse, and Nunes 100K. Garcia was really in a great position to almost unify the entire division to become undisputed. Lamont Peterson was already the IBF champ for a while. He was already a household name, but they stalled making this fight for so long to where it didn't even matter anymore. I don't think it would have been any issues trying to fight the newly crowned WBO champ Chris Algieri because he wasn't a top-ranked fighter or had any exclusive contract with HBO. There's not too much to discuss fight-wise. Danny disposed of Rod Salka, celebrates like he made a statement. What makes this worse is, yes, Rod fought at lightweight, but also easily made super featherweight, which he did one fight later. So this is one of the only fights on the list where the fighter caught cherry picking wins the fight, but really lost because a majority of fight fans never looked at Danny the same, especially after the Peterson fight. This was before Instagram had a comment filter system and limited or turned off comment section. Fight fans for months to a year would flood Danny's posts with cherry emojis. The 1993 year started big for Morrison when he defeated Foreman for the WBO title. With the climbing of the heavyweight class, the departure of Mike Tyson, the fading of Evander Holyfield, Morrison, with his popularity because of the Rocky movie, becoming champ and sharing some Tyson-like characteristics, he had a massive chance of becoming boxing's biggest star. He won the belt, put on some great shows, and secured a massive big money fight against Lennox Lewis. All Morrison had to do was just prepare for his fight with Lewis in December of '93. Ego, because this is what Morrison wanted, then powered by greed of his handlers because that's more money to be made and sell out arenas. This incredibly risky fight was made against unknown Michael Bent, which was labeled a tune-up fight despite Morrison already fighting 2 months earlier. Michael Bent had to have taken that personal, especially insulting, because Morrison is supposed to be fighting Lewis and stop Morrison in the first round, become the new WBO champion, and ruining Team Morrison plans. Ortiz is just coming off his fight with Floyd Mayweather and his suspension for blatantly headbutting Floyd due to his on-record rant on Seconds Out. Due to how the narrative was flipped to make Ortiz look like the victim out of all of this, Ortiz's popularity was at a newfound high despite the loss. So the new goal was to set Ortiz up in September against rising star Canelo Alvarez to compete with the HBO September date of Martinez vs. Chavez Jr. This was all put into works after just moments finalizing the contract for a September date.
Alvarez, Chavez, and Martinez, the biggest names out there right now in my weight besides Mayweather and Pacquiao. And I know that ain't gonna come true, so I look for the ones I can make it get.
And you like staying at this weight? You're comfortable 154?
Weight 60 don't matter to me. You know what I'm saying? As long as I get a guy that's in front of me that's willing to fight, it don't matter. We come in at 101.
Former champion Paul Williams would get into a motorbike accident, leaving himself paralyzed from the legs down. With the Ortiz-Berto rematch being cancelled due to Berto testing positive for steroids, there was high hopes Ortiz would be that fighter to fill in that September date with an easy setup match, since the June 23rd date was already booked by the promotion. His new opponent, semi-unknown Josecito Lopez. Lopez made his name beating undefeated prospect Mike Dallas Jr., giving him his first loss, and then losing in a close fight against next generation hopeful Jesse Vargas. Lopez had no rank by Ring Magazine at 140, but he did have rank within the WBC because of his win against Mike Dallas Jr., sitting at number 12. Also, keep in mind that this was before somehow Mike had a fight with Lucas Matisse for the WBC interim title to fight Danny Garcia. Lopez was chosen because he seemed like an easy pick for a tune-up fight for Canelo in September, as Mike Dallas wasn't seen as much and Jesse Vargas at the time was looking like a bust. It really didn't help that Bob Arum boldly said that Jesse will one day be fighting Manny Pacquiao. That raised expectations high, and looking at his performance from then all the way before the Bradley fight, it was the least bit impressive. Not a single opponent they threw to this guy made him look good. So the fight, Ortiz was looking good and Lopez kept it competitive, which was expected. But what was not expected, that Lopez, despite starting to look fatigued, would come back the way he did, and due to possibly the worst luck on Ortiz's end, he would get clipped by a barrage of shots which would break his jaw. Right at the final 20 seconds of the round, Lopez immediately knew something was up. He was back at 100% HP because of it, as Ortiz had no answer back as he tries to give Lopez a bluff to keep Lopez at bay, but Lopez wasn't having it, which caused Ortiz to quickly backpedal away on the defensive till the round comes to an end. Ortiz will retire on his stool and Lopez will be declared the winner by TKO. The look on Canelo and Oscar's face is priceless, as Oscar's plan A and now plan B is down the drain for September. Vitaly Klitschko retires, and we would see possibly the worst and weakest title grab in the history of the weight class. Chris Arreola managing to earn the WBC international title against American heavyweight hopeful Seth Mitchell. Then Bermane Stiverne just barely managing to get a win against former contender Ray Alston. You see what Latimer did to him in 2 rounds.
I didn't expect that it's gonna be as easy as it was, and it was easy actually because Ray Alston was much slower than my sparring partners.
And you see that this is an even fight where Ray is up on the scorecards. It really just goes to tell you how bad the state of the heavyweight division is in North America.
He's fighting a journeyman. The journeyman is schooling him right now.
Ray Austin just jabbing, piling up points. 86-84, Ray to Rain Man Austin.
Klitschko, I don't know if he ever threw a punch. and Klitschko actually never threw a right hand in that fight.
Ended it with a left hook.
Which will put in perspective class of heavyweights we're watching here.
Right.
So Vitaly's vacant title was fought between Stiverne and Chris Arreola in a rematch. Stiverne will beat Chris. Now Latimer at that point was making it his mission to get his brother's title back to become undisputed, as he holds all the rest of the titles. So the powers to be across the pond was like, yep, that's not gonna happen. And Wilder Stiverne was made. Wilder would plow through Stiverne, but he managed to let Stiverne back into the fight in the final quarter due to just being exhausted. Wilder would earn a wide unanimous decision to become the first American title holder since Shannon Briggs in 2006. Klitschko is calling for unification for the undisputed title. Stiverne and then Wilder's management is not having it, pulling all the excuses out of the book, saying Wilder is not ready to fight a Klitschko. Since Klitschko is not ranked by the WBC, he can't force Wilder to fight him, which that would be Klitschko's next attempt, since the writing's on the wall, he's being blocked. So he tries to get a fight with a ranked WBC opponent. That would be number 3 WBC ranked Bryant Jennings. Also, funny note that when Klitschko Jennings was announced, Jennings was magically removed from the WBC rankings. Keep in mind, Jennings was ranked number 3 by the WBC January 2015. The very next month, he is nowhere to be found. So with all this context here of possibly the most protected title, we see Wilder face Eric Molina, who magically went from number 26 in the rankings to number 11. You had Stiverne, who lost to Wilder for the title, still in the top 5 ranks, all while Bryant Jennings, who is scheduled to fight Klitschko, removed altogether. Absolutely insane.
Any other sport, there being an attorney general would be showing up somewhere and saying, wait a minute, we have to investigate this. Wait a minute. You can't just move a guy from nowhere to all of a sudden where he's going to fight for a world title. Unfortunately, in this sport, with no proper supervising, no proper watchdog, no proper policing, and that's why the sport is always in a threat of becoming less and less relevant.
Alright, the fight. So Wilder does his thing early. Molina also starting to connect in the second round. The third round, Wilder would get cracked by Molina, then followed up with Wilder making more fundamental mistakes to get cracked again. Molina on a full offense for the greater period of the round till Wilder would regain his legs and we would see him rally back in the final 20 seconds. That momentum will be on Wilder's side as he is a much fresher out of the two. He will clearly win the round and drop Molina in the final seconds of the fourth. Molina will catch another knockdown in the fifth round. Molina, tired and in survival mode for 2 rounds, would finally recover and catch a second win, piling shots on Wilder, the body attack stopping Wilder's offense. And here we see why so much was made to prevent Klitschko from having a chance of fighting Wilder. Molina looking punched out, and he is just winging shots to the body and head, wide open to be countered with absolutely no answer from Wilder, which this boosted Molina's confidence where he finished the round strong. His best round in the fight since the third. The ninth was an offensive struggle by both guys. That rush Molina had in the 8th wore off, and he looked like a tiny breeze would tip him over. Wilder would find his opening after Molina had repeated the same telegraph combination, the second time really leaving himself out there to get countered. Wilder lands a counter right as Molina rushes in, and he was just out from that alone as the other shots missed. In 2007, Erik Morales would announce his retirement from boxing after losing to WBC champion David Diaz by a close unanimous decision. In 2010, he would make a comeback to boxing. Most took it not seriously, and the usual stereotypical responses, "Oh, he needs money. Stop trying to relive your glory days. Just stop. You're ruining your legacy." The man already sealed his legacy. Let him finish his career the way he wants to. His first fight was at welterweight. He will then have another fight 7 months apart where he will weigh in at 143, and to end the year off in his final fight of the 2010 year, he'll make the junior welterweight class. So it seemed like Erik's approach, he decided to fight on smaller cards as to get the rust off, sharpen up, and most certainly get that weight off. And it wasn't like he was fighting nobodies. His first fight back, he fought former champion and contender Jose Gazzo. Gazzo just coming off a loss against Antonio DeMarco for the WBA interim title, then Willie Lyman for the WBC silver title. Lyman was on a 5-win streak after losing to Amir Khan, which Lyman had knocked Khan down in their bout for the Commonwealth title. Despite Morales sort of just being thrown into the WBC ranks after his comeback fight, literally in the top 3 ranks, which I can't really give you a reason why, Morales definitely had to prove to people behind the scenes he belongs in the ranks in general, which he did. That went overlooked due to Morales' physical appearance. To start the 2011 year off, Morales was given most would see as a retirement fight. This matchup was demonized by the fans and media. HBO just barely gave this a green light to even put their name beside it. If not, this would have been a Golden Boy pay-per-view like Casemiro versus Marquez. HBO didn't really push the fight either, despite it being a pay-per-view. I didn't even get to talk about Maidana. So Maidana is coming off hot off his show against Amir Khan, and since Morales had ranked within the WBA at number 5, I don't know how, but this was selected to be for the interim WBA title. Maidana was supposed to blow through Morales, pass the torch, Morales retires, and Maidana gets the Amir Khan rematch.
In the absence of the chance to fight Marquez, to the shock and surprise of almost all ringside critics, Morales reached out and said, "I want to fight Marcos Maidana." It is regarded by almost everyone here as a very bad idea, but he's Erik Morales. He has a sure ticket to the Hall of Fame. He is as arrogant as any fighter in the last 20 years.
Hardcore Morales fans would gather for one last match, hoping this would not end up like Chavez's final title shot. Well, it certainly started off bad as Morales gets thumbed in the eye and pummeled in the first round. Morales' eyes is closed shut. In an average fight, it would have stopped right after that round. But given the fact that this is more than likely Morales' last fight, this is a headliner to a pay-per-view, and the money spent for this event, the show must go on. Round 2, Morales is immediately picking up his offense and landing rather effectively. Maidana would come back, as it looked like it was going Maidana's way. Before we get there, let's not forget the 3 Mexican kings, Morales, Guerrero, and Marquez. No matter what happens, if their opponent one-ups them, they're going to come back with some fire and try to one-up you. And that's exactly what happened, and Maidana, in shock, had no answer.
Absolutely huge right hand. Maidana. And suddenly Maidana has been knocked back.
Maidana would take back the 3rd round, but Morales would pick it back up and rally in the final minute. The 4th round, Morales would lose, but the fight would be at his pace. The 5th round, Morales is completely picking apart Maidana, then to finish the round big, waking the crowd up and giving the folks who bought a ticket hope and their money's worth.
Oh, these are hard shots for Morales. And accurate.
A last stand by Morales, perhaps. Oh, the aging warrior teaching the young star a thing or two about hand speed and combination punching.
As Morales is getting a breather, Maidana is rallying back. As Maidana was about to end the round big, Morales comes back and puts it on Maidana to end the round.
Appeared to have been more affected by that punch than by any other shot he's taken from Maidana, and Maidana seems to know it, and the old warrior fights back again. He's never known any other way. He's never helped for a moment. He's never tried to get away from combat. He's always fought his way out.
There's still greatness left in Eric Morales.
By this point in the fight, no matter what happens, Morales won the event. Morales is forcing Maidana in the 7th round to fight off the back foot, and Maidana is getting eaten up because of that. 8th round would be all Morales. Morales would crack him early, stumbling the contender, then to fight with him in the phone booth. Despite Maidana mounting up a good counter offense, it's being overshadowed by Morales's. This round goes to show that Maidana did not prepare properly, like he did with the Khan fight, and he is at this point exhausted, while Morales looks like the fresher guy.
Round, but it hasn't happened.
Oh! Huge left hook! Maidana's holding on. Maidana is still in trouble as he stands in the corner and waits. Morales.
Oh! The uppercut on the inside. See, and the hook.
Big left hand by Morales.
Morales, after the 8th, would tie Maidana on Harold's scorecard. Maidana, despite looking out of it in the 8th, and the 9th, he would let out one ballsy, energy-taxing flurry of shots, trying to get Morales out of there, under the assumption he had punched himself out.
Seized command and strafed Morales with a series of about 12 power punches. And right now, Maidana believes that he's trying to finish the fight.
Maidana would come to a rude awakening and get caught with a 3-punch combination while rushing in. Morales would take over the back half of the round, leaving it all on the line.
All of a sudden, Maidana has found the second win. Look at him take Morales' hard shots.
Eric Morales.
Unbelievable. I don't think there's a soul in the arena who believed that Marcus Maidana versus Eric Morales was going to become a serious candidate for Fight of the Year.
And yet it is. Not to mention upset of the year.
Morales would craft up another solid round, making it 96-94, 2 rounds up on Harold's scorecards.
To think that he could do it.
It also points out.
Hypothetical question, you're at Canastota. Oh. Well, we can't talk about it now because he's finally, after a while, he said, maybe Pacquiao.
Yeah, it was
Guerrero. At this moment, it's hard to imagine that Guerrero could be competitive.
Maidana would finally rally back this round due to Morales' lack of punch count and win it. With the fight potentially on the line, Maidana would go all out to get Morales out of there, but Morales was keeping it even in the first half. The final half is up for grabs, as both guys are landing at a great rate. The final straight at the end may have won it for Maidana in the 12th. Due to Morales losing the 11th and the 12th, Harold scored the fight a draw on the scorecards. 1 out of the 3 judges would score it the same as Harold, 114-114, and the other having it 116-112 in Maidana's favor, ruling it a majority decision. Just think if Morales wasn't blinded in the first round to where he had to use instincts figuring out where Maidana's at, that and having maybe one more fight leading up to this, He may have very well beaten Maidana. So obviously because of this show, Maidana did not fight Khan, and Khan went to unify against Zab Judah.
Al inicio de la pelea tenía mis dudas. ¿Será este el momento donde el boxeador se tiene que retirar y no lo entiende, no lo alcanza a ver? Nah.
As discussed in my video of real-life Hajime no Ippo moments, Takahara is a real-life Takamura. Jorge Castro was considered to be the best middleweight in the division after big wins against champion Reggie Johnson for the WBA title, the undefeated John David Jackson, and another big win in his rematch against Reggie Johnson. This put Castro number 2 in the world ranks under the G-Man Gerald McClellan. Given this is an archive ring issue of 1995, and this fight took place later in the year of 95, when it was indefinitely ruled that Gerald McClellan will not be returning to boxing due to his incident with Nigel Benn, that will make Castro as a #1 ranked middleweight in the division by Ring Magazine. Japan is not known for fighters above the lightweight divisions, so Shinji, with his skills and natural size, at that time was practically unheard of. Takahara will only finish middle school and skip high school to further his boxing training. He started his pro career at 17 years old. Unfortunately, the Pacific region in that weight class at that time was incredibly weak. The opponents he was facing were unknown and pushovers, thus putting Takahara under the radar. Takahara would quickly pick up the Japanese regional title, important title you need to even get into the world ranks if you're not from America. He would make 4 defenses. One of those defenses was against a now familiar face in boxing, the father of the 2-time and unified champion Kenshiro Taraji. Pretty wild. His dad is a natural middleweight sitting at 6'2", and his son, who is on the road to becoming a future Hall of Famer, is 5'5", fighting at light flyweight. Anyways, Shinji would pick up the OPBF crown, which signifies he is the best in the Pacific region. Like I said, the Pacific region is incredibly weak. It is comedically weak. So Shinji blew through these guys. He showed he had quite a bit of punching power, but there's actually no way to tell he can actually crack because the lack of ranked opponents. We're talking about in the top 50 ranks. After 4 defenses of the OPBF crown, the 23-year-old's management somehow got him a title shot against the best fighter in the weight class. Now his management had a lot of faith in him to not only get the fight, but get the fight in Japan. But they didn't think the Japanese public had faith in him to win, so they booked the fight in the legendary Korakuen Hall over a large arena in fear of losing money of their investment due to low gate. This fight can easily pack the hall and create an amazing atmosphere over the Yokohama Arena or the Superdome, which those same amount will buy the tickets, but there will be many empty seats because this was a mismatch on paper. Castro, more than likely thinking this is an easy payday, then he will be back on his way to a bigger fight, came to a rude awakening. From the first round and on, Takahara, who has never fought a top 5 rank, better yet a top 30 rank fighter in his career, rose to the occasion and fought like he's a top 5 rank, and then some, completely taking apart the ill-prepared Castro. Shinji was even able to hurt and knock down the champion. Round by round, Shinji was shocking spectators, which you can see the nervous excitement that their homegrown fighter is going to be Japan's first middleweight champion. Takahara would finish the fight strong and seal the deal and make history to do so. It's actually a good thing he never let off the gas and put it on Castro, because despite the beating Castro took and the knockdown, one judge had it 114-116. Adonis Stevenson was an upcoming prospect quickly moving through the ranks in Canada and world ranks, picking up the WBC Continental Regional title, then the WBC International title. So a fight against a fighter who has a record of 16-15 with 2 draws on your US and Showtime debut doesn't really sound good. So Showtime never broadcasted it, the footage never exists besides home video. Darnell Boone was coming off a stupendously busy 2009 year after a 2-year hiatus. 6 fights, all 6 against blue chip prospects, most notably Edwin Rodriguez, Arislandi Lara, and Craig McGuinn. He will start the 2010 year off fighting prospect Jose Angel Rodriguez and Brandon Gonzalez. Everything about this reeks of cherry picking. Boone was notified on a 2 weeks notice. Boone was currently training himself at the time. Dude had no trainer. Despite Boone not knowing much about Stevenson either, he assumed he can't be that experienced. So with Boone already being sharp from his constant activity, he took the fight. And, well, there you go. This home video here pretty much explains itself. This would probably make number 1 on the list, but I think we know what will be discussed last. Seinsek Murin is a Muay Thai great. The champ accomplished what he wanted to accomplish and wanted to make a splash in boxing and do it fast. He wanted a world title shot immediately, and the best thing to do is challenge the number 1 contender, and that was Rudy Barrow. Rudy was ranked number 3 by Ring Magazine, number 1 by the WBA at lightweight, and number 3 by the WBC at junior welterweight. He was in line to fight WBC junior welterweight champion Perico Fernandez in January that next year. Rudy's record wasn't all too impressive, and his claim to these positions was a string of upsets, earning him the nickname Mr. Upset. Mungsurin's people paid Rudy $20,000 to come to Thailand and fight their guy in hopes that Mungsurin will get a title shot. Rudy gladly accepted the offer because, in the mindset of folks in boxing, even to today's mindset, boxers and most boxing fans do not consider Muay Thai artists and kickboxers as real boxers, despite the fact that you have to be taught the art of Western boxing to progress in these arts. Well, this is 1974, so Rudy gets a pass for his ignorance. A crowd in the thousands showed up for the former Muay Thai champ's professional boxing debut. Barrow is on the immediate attack at the start of the first round, thinking that's all he has to do to get Mungsurin out there. Seinsek took no time at all to figure Barrow out, and he took him out with a perfect counter right, laying out Barrow, ending the fight in under 1 minute of the first round. On paper, Mungsurin should be in the line to fight for the title. Perico wouldn't mind either because a lot of money is now being offered for this fight. But the WBC stepped in, mostly because they were suspicious that Barrow took a dive. And WBC President Roman G. Velasquez stated, no fighter with 1 professional bout should be fighting for a world title. In order for him to fight for the title, he needs to fight another WBC ranked opponent within the top 10 or win the Asian Pacific title. So to end this segment off, Seinsek fought number 3 WBC ranked Leon Furuyama. Seinsek would stop Leon in the 7th round, earning the shot for the junior welterweight crown. He would knock Perico Fernandez out in the 8th round to be the fastest fighter to become world champion. Now, if you follow this channel or me on social media, you know I have no problem with these types of fights. With all that being said, many slept on Francis Nagano. He came from the UFC, but unlike McGregor, Francis has a legit kickboxing background. Even though he started out in kickboxing and only had 1 or so fights professionally, he still had to spend quite a bit of time learning the art. Throughout the history of boxing, kickboxers and Muay Thai guys have proven they can easily transition into traditional Western boxing and become world-class fighters. I think one excuse I heard was Francis wasn't that good of a kickboxer. Well, neither was Juan Jong-kan. Won Jong-kan was convinced by his manager that he will be a better boxer than a Muay Thai fighter. He went into boxing after 50 Muay Thai fights. The man became a 2-time lineal champion and WBC champion. He holds the record of the fastest knockout in flyweight title fight history, holds the record for the most title defenses at flyweight, and was awarded as the WBC champion of the decade. Yeah, so much for a non-boxer. I feel like if fans looked more into the history of these guys who came from the other arts of combat, this gatekeeping mentality will come to an end. Heavyweight legend George Foreman once said, "There's no book in the world of making it in boxing because any path can become a successful path." This was in reference to the new undefeated contender who later became a unified champion, Nate Campbell, who picked up boxing at the late age of 25, went pro at 27, and found himself in the mix for a title shot just barely 2 years as a pro. Now, going by how offbeat Tyson was on the pads during fight week, let that set the tone how ill-prepared he was coming in. To also note that Tyson looked past Francis's size and strength. Outside of the Klitschko fight, Tyson always had the size, strength, and weight advantage on his opponents, which seemed to be an Emmanuel Stewart Kronk Gem signature with his heavyweights, as Lennox Lewis and Vladimir Klitschko uses these tactics. Peck away at the outside, occasional straight, then hold, pushing all that weight on their guy, rinse, wash, and repeat to where their guy is so tired and battered that they can catch them with something they can't see or just simply get the stoppage. Fury could not use these tactics, and he would have to think twice before even trying to hold because Francis has the advantage. So we would see Fury fight more on the outside like in the Klitschko fight and when he was testing waters and boundaries in the first Wilder fight. The lack of Fury not being able to fight at his pace, we were treated to some interesting moments early on, which led to a beautiful counter left hook by Nagano to floor Fury to the canvas. Tyson will have his moments which were supposed to have been part of the script, but Nagano is outshining Fury by a wide margin. Right when it looked like Fury was just getting ahead in the fight, Francis would come back big, as seen in the 8th round. Absolute struggle by Fury to get anything on Francis, who is displaying quite a fine defense, something that is expected from someone who has practiced kickboxing. Francis, who expended a lot of energy throughout the whole fight, did not finish the fight strong. He finished as if he was up on the scorecards without the need of putting in a dagger, which in boxing that's frowned upon with the judges. Though there wasn't really a title for this fight, reasons why it was 10 rounds and not 12, you gotta take the title away from the champ. So there's many situations where this has happened and a close fight and the judges would side and give it to the champion or the A side. The career of Winky Wright is a perfect example. He did it not only in his fight with Fernando Vargas, but also against Jermaine Taylor, which cost him dearly.
I'm like, what is he doing? I mean, he went in on the flurries. Go ahead and fight me. If I was him, I just would have kept fighting. That's the difference between us.
You think, since this fight was a draw, that he blew the fight in the 12th round?
If he wanted the title so bad, he should have fought all 12 rounds, because that's what I would have did. That's what I did. I fought all 12 rounds. I didn't get in there running them last rounds thinking I had to fight one. You know, I feel like it's a boxing match. You got to fight all 12 rounds.
Fury would win by a debatable split decision. Reasons why I say debatable is because I read mixed opinions on the scoring. It's pretty divided. It's either people thought Fury won just barely, the fight was a draw, or Francis won. But like the Morales-Maidana fight, Francis may have lost the fight officially, but he won the event. With the elephant in the room here, if we as boxing fans are going to have the energy with Deontay Wilder's reign as a WBC champion, where we saw much of nothing and no unification for the undisputed title, we need to have the same energy for Tyson Fury. It's going on exactly 10 years since Vitaly Klitschko vacated the WBC title, retired from boxing, and his brother, who had all the belts, went on a journey to obtain his brother's title, where he was blocked from doing so. These 10 years, it's been one party with 3 out of the 4 belts, and one party and their unwillingness to fight for the undisputed title. As I'm saying this now in early November, because I haven't heard anything yet, if this is not made by late this year or early next year, Fury needs to do his job as champion and fight as mandatory or be stripped of the title. New title holder, same BS. Where's the end? And on top of that, this is when cherry picking goes wrong. For more videos like these, be sure to like, share, and if you're new, subscribe to the Patreon for Patreon-backed projects and early access. This Patreon-backed project being on the tale of Floyd Mayweather versus Ricky Hatton. I'm Office Honcho, and I'm out.